So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Radio Sophia and very warm welcome to the speaker, Riddhi. So basically, Riddhi has completed her MBA from IIM Kozhikode and completed her FP, fellow program from IIM Calcutta in the marketing department. And she is very passionate about academics, and she is also engaging in teaching, researching, and reading and conducting a lot of workshops. And on the personal front, she's actually launched two startups, and I myself was very interested to know that she climbed Mount Everest base camp, and also she's a mother of two little munchkins, and I think they keep her hands full almost all the time. And her PhD thesis is on the topic iconic and symbolic religious science in print advertising, impact on brand effect and brand trust. And this particular workshop is basically on semiotics. When I heard the topic first time, I was also not very much aware of it, except for probably the definition of it. And that caught my interest, and I'm sure that caught most of your interest too. So, semiotics is basically the study of signs and symbols. Its basic theories and classifications will be covered in this workshop, and she will also talk about how semiotic concepts blend with marketing using some real world examples. And at the end of the session, I hope most of the participants will be able to think semiotically and learn how to dissect and question deeper cultural meanings behind brand names, logos, and advertising. And without much further ado, let me invite Riddhi to take on the stage.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kranti, for having me here. This
My
is
pleasure.
wonderful because I'll tell you a brief intro about how I kind of came across semiotics. So, like she said, my thesis was basically on religious signs and symbols and how they are present in Indian advertising and how they impact brand evaluation. And I just happened to stumble upon this entire field called semiotics, which in India I don't know, but I've never even heard about it. And this field is huge, really. And in fact, in today's workshop, what I am covering is only just the tip of the iceberg, just a basic introduction, basic classification of signs and what this field entails. But of course, if any of you are really interested, you can ping me offline and later we can take the discussion further also. So I think I should just start with my screen share. Kranti, you need to help me. I need to, I can't hear you. You need to
Oh, sorry.
unmute yourself.
You can share your screen now. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a minute. Can everyone see that? Is that fine?
Yes, yes, it's clear. Yeah.
Okay. So, how do I? Okay. So quickly, so the points that I'm going to cover today are basically A, what is a sign? Because obviously the topic of semiotics is on signs. B, we will look at the concept of signifier and signified. We will look at the classification of signs into three categories: the icon, index, and symbol. And then we will look at something called myths and archetypes. So, firstly, what is semiotics? Semiotics is, like we said, the study of signs. I'm not going to use the word symbols over here. I will only use the word signs. Now, sign is something that stands for something else or something that can represent something else. It is the smallest unit of meaning in semiotics. Okay. So now let's say I want to. I can't. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. I want to signify the concept of a dog. Okay, so how do I do that? I could I could just write the word dog, and you would know that I'm talking about a dog. Or I could draw a picture of a dog, and you would understand that I'm thinking of a four-legged animal, which is a dog. I could maybe show you a photograph of my dog, or I could also maybe act out like a dog. Okay, so here the written word dog, the picture of the dog, a photograph of a dog, and even the action of a dog, all of these are signs. Okay, so a sign is not, how we usually think of the word signs and symbols. No, sign can be in any form. Anything that represents something else is a sign. Fair enough. Okay, so Now, signs don't necessarily have to signify a concrete concept like a dog. It can also signify abstract concepts like anger, like any other kind of feelings. So I want you to unmute yourself and tell me that if you had to signify anger, how would you do that? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, be a monologue then.
Emoji, maybe with showing the anger emotion.
Yeah, very nice. Exactly. So one is, of course, you could do an emoticon. I've got that somewhere here. Here, I've got that emoticon. So you could, maybe you could write a note. You could say, I hate you or something. You could send an emoticon to that person. Sometimes unknowingly or unintentionally, our facial expressions or the clenching of our fists can also signify anger. Or, I mean, it could be an intentional thing also. I could, of course, punch you in the face and say, oh, I'm really angry at you. So the interesting thing here is that I am signifying something which I can't see, and the person in front of me also can't see. In fact, that person can't even feel that thing most of the times. Okay, but and not only can I signify that thing, that abstract concept of anger, I can also signify the extent of that anger. So I can also signify that how angry I am at that time. Okay, now there can be various signs from nature. So let's say you see smoke arising from the top of a forest. So the forest officials would know that there is a forest fire. Or let's say you wake up in the morning and you see puddles on the road, or you see that the streets are wet, you would know that it has been raining the night before. Or similarly, let's say you see black clouds in the sky, you would know that it is about to rain. So all of these are signs, right? Let's look at religious signs. I will keep coming back to religion because I can't help it. This was what my thesis work was about, and I find this really, really interesting. Okay. So something as simple as the star and moon, which really doesn't mean anything. I don't know what that means, but it is a symbol for Islam. Something like a swastika has very, very different meanings for Hindus and obviously for Jewish and Germans, right? The prayer beads are a very, very common sign which is there in many religions. Something like a trishul, you could think of Lord Shiva. In today's day, you might think of RSS, you might think of Hindu extremists. So again, that one symbol sign can have multiple meanings. If you see that crown of thorns or you look at the cross of crucifixion, you would obviously have images of Jesus Christ. So like I said, firstly, that almost anything can be a sign. It can be actions, body language, words, pictures, images, symbols, emoticons, colors, natural phenomena. Is there anyone who can think of a way in which colors are signs? A very simple example, something that we see every day.
Traffic lights.
Very nice. Who is the Sucharita? Very nice.
Yeah.
See, the concept of red, yellow, green, I don't know, no one knows how that came. I mean, that's not even the point. The point is that together as a society, we have decided that the red light means stop or that the green light means go. It's not something that has any connection with stop or go. Similarly, if you have a green dot on a packaged food, you would know that it means vegetarian and red means non-vegetarian. So these are all signs. Okay. So now let's look at a bit of theory. So this gentleman, his name is Ferdinand de Saussure. He is considered to be the big daddy of semiotics. He was actually a linguist. A linguist is a person who studies languages. Okay, he was a Swiss linguist. His works were actually posthumously published in I think 1917 or 1919. I forget. What did Saussure say? He says that a sign is made up of two things. Okay, one is the signifier, which is basically that thing which is trying to represent something else. So the letters DOG, dog, or the picture of the dog, or the drawing of an apple, or the red light on the traffic signal, all of these are the signifiers. And the signified is the mental concept that the communicator is trying to evoke. Okay, so you have a signifier and you have a signified. Okay, and together these two are the important concepts in a sign. Okay, so now since Saussure was a linguist, he basically says that language is a sign system and that language should also be studied as a part of semiotics. Okay, so he talks about the arbitrariness of language. So the main concept that he has said is that the only reason why the signifier means the signified concept is because we as a society have decided that, right? Why does the word dog, does it have any linkage or connection to that animal dog? Or does the word cat have any connection with a cat? It doesn't. But how these letters form that word and how that word means that animal, this has been decided by society, right? So there is a very arbitrary linkage between the signifier and the signified. So for example, if we use other words, like if I say the word kutta, which is dog in Hindi, or I say kukur, or I say chien or pero or can, these are all different names of dogs in different languages. Not everyone will understand that, no? So if I understand kutta, it's because I understand Hindi. There will only be a group of people who will understand that meaning. Not everyone will understand that meaning. Okay, so there is an arbitrary connection between the sign and the signifier and the signified. Okay, so how is meaning made? He says that because different signs have different meanings. So there are lots of different. So BAT means the bat, CAT means cat, and MAT means mat. I like Matt Damon, so I put Matt Damon instead of a mat over there. Okay. So far, so good. Everyone is with me, no? Okay, so a little bit more on Saussure, okay, because this is important since we are talking about semiotics. I will move to the marketing part of it soon. So he says that language is made of two parts, the lang and the parole, okay. Now the lang is the collection of all the possible signs and rules. So all the possible words, your vocabulary, all the rules, so your verbs, your nouns, your prepositions, conjunctions, all of them together, all the rules that you have for language, all of them make up the lang, okay. And the parole is the actual creation of meaning. How an individual creates meaning is either through writing or through speech, right? So the lang and parole together, they make up language. Okay. So the main concept to take away here is that the sign system can exist perfectly only within the community, not within a single speaker. So if I suddenly decide that the traffic light should be blue, it will not make sense. Okay. It is something which has to be decided by the entire community. So now let's move on to a person called Roland Barthes. Okay, he says, fine, I understand your level of, I understand that signifier means the signified, but he says that there are different levels of meanings, right? So you have one signifier, let's say a rose. I have written ROSE, rose. It will signify the flower rose, but he says that is the basic denotation. This is what it denotes, but it also has various connotations. So there are different levels of meaning. So while that word rose, the first meaning is the rose, the actual flower, but it also means passion. It also means love. Then the different colors of the rose will have different meanings. I'm sure the younger generation will know more of the white rose, yellow rose, red rose, and all of that, right? So your cultural associations and assumptions, they are the connotations. Okay. So we are going to do a quick thing here. Okay. So let's look at some common brand logos. Okay. So when you have a logo for Rolex, can someone tell me what is that sign on top of that? Come on.
Crown.
Yeah, obviously it's a crown. Thank you. So what does that crown stand for, Deepanjan?
It's monarchy, king,
Okay.
queen.
Rolex is trying to show that they are monarchs. Maybe.
Try to show that it's a royal brand.
A royal brand. Okay. So they may be connoting royalty, luxury, even maybe monarchy, that you know that they're leaders in their field, maybe. What about Dove?
Dove is peace.
Peace. So why does the Dove brand have Dove on that? What else could it connote? What other connotation?
Gentleness.
Very nice. Okay, gentleness, purity, the whiteness, the virginity. So again, so like I said, now the meaning of signs is socially constructed. Okay, so maybe the way you interpret it could be different from the way I interpret it, which is why as a marketer it is very, very important that, you know, when you're using these signs, it's very important to understand how the user or the consumer is going to interpret that sign. Okay. Jaguar, obviously, speed, power, stealth, or Chennai Super Kings having the lion being the king of the jungle. And if you see the lion that's roaring, so it's not a gentle lion, it's a roaring lion. So, and the flaming hair and the mane at the back, it shows power and pride, etc. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to move on to okay, I'm going at good timing. So if anyone wants to stop me and say something here, I can move on to the next part of it. Is this fine so far?
Good.
Everyone's understood? Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at the various classification of signs. Okay. So now the problem with Saussure's work was that it was too tied down in language and linguistic, because he was a linguist primarily. So he was talking only from a language perspective. Okay. So now there's another gentleman called Charles Sanders Peirce. Was an American semiotician. Now he uses these semiotic concepts outside the written and oral work. Okay, he says that, okay, let's look at signs, but let's look at signs of all kinds, not just language. His work was actually more logic oriented and more empirical in nature. Okay, so now what C.S. Peirce says is that in language, I agree that the relationship between the signifier and signified is arbitrary, right? Like dog doesn't mean anything. Sorry. But this is not true with all kinds of signs, right? Because when I showed you a picture of my dog and you understood it was a dog, it was because of that physical resemblance between the dog and the actual being. So it's not an arbitrary relationship. Not everything is arbitrary. So that's what he's trying to say. So he says that there might be relationships between the signifier and the signified. Okay. And based on this relationship, he comes up with 3 classifications of signs. Okay. He says that there is sorry, I'm speaking too fast. So now based on the relationship between the signifier and the signified, there can be 3 classifications: an icon, index, or a symbol. Now, firstly, in an icon, the relationship between the signifier and the signified is that of physical resemblance or similarity. So like I said, the picture of a dog or a photograph of a person, or like in this case, there is a picture of a cycle. It is called an icon. It basically is depicting the same thing that is being drawn over there, right? So if there is a cycle drawn, it's the place for cycle parking. So an icon has physical resemblance to the thing that is being signified. Okay, fair enough? Yeah. Okay. Next, you have the index. Now, an index, there has to be a direct relationship between the signifier and the signified. This relationship can be of 2 types. One is a causal linkage. Okay. So one thing causes the other. So like we said, smoke is caused by fire, or the puddles were caused by rain, or the dark clouds can signify rain, because there is a causal linkage between the 2. Okay. And the other way that there can be a direct relationship is something being by something being a part of the whole. Okay. So in this case, when you see the skull and the crossbones, it is actually trying to signify the whole skeleton, which could have connotations of danger. Okay. So, but it is a part of the whole. So for example, if I show you a peacock feather and a flute, you would understand that I'm trying to depict Lord Krishna, right? Or if I showed you just a Damru and Trishul, you would know that I'm trying to depict Lord Shiva. So these are part of the whole image, right? So these are not icons, they are indices. Indices will have either a causal linkage or they will be a part of the whole. Now in the third category, which is called a symbol, the relationship between the signifier and signified is completely conventional in nature. There is no physical similarity. There is no connection between the 2. There is no causal linkage. It's not a part of the whole. It is a very, very conventionally decided meaning. It is a meaning that has been decided by society. So all words usually are symbols. Symbols could be, like we said, traffic lights. Also symbols like swastika or Om are also symbols, because they really don't mean anything as such, except that we have been taught that this is what this means. Okay, is this clear? Does anyone have any questions here? Because I'm going to ask you some, I'm going to show you some
Yes, it's clear.
Clear? Okay. So let's just look at it again. The first step is the relationship is through similarity in an icon. So outside a bathroom door, if you see a silhouette of a male and a female, you know, it's very, very clear that this is for male, this is for female, through similarity. The second one in an index, either through a causal linkage or a part of the whole. So let's say, for example, if you are designing a brand logo for Starbucks. Okay, so you've got a cup of tea and you've got those 3 lines on top of that. Okay, what are those 3 lines signifying? They are signifying the steam which is arising from the hot beverage which is inside the cup. Do you get that? I don't know. Is everyone getting that, or is this too vague? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. So, yeah, okay.
It's fine.
So, yeah, so there is a causal linkage, and also, of course, the steam is part of the whole also. So this is an index. And the last one is a symbol, where the meaning is derived from a conventionally assigned meaning. So in the case of a hazard sign, which is just a yellow triangle with an exclamation mark, if I didn't know that what that means, it wouldn't mean anything to me. But as a society, we have decided that if you see this mark, please be careful, this is a hazard sign, right? Or like we said, all words or traffic lights, all of these are symbols. Okay, so let's look at some real world examples. Okay, when we are burning an effigy of Ravan during the Dussehra, what is this? Anyone wants to unmute? What is this? An icon, index, or symbol?
Icon.
An icon, exactly. Because this is an exact replication of our imagination of Ravan, obviously. Okay, so with the 10 heads, etc. So if instead of using the icon, we had just used a symbol and we just had maybe a stick figure, then I don't think it would have as much meaning and it wouldn't evoke as much emotions as maybe burning of the actual image of Ravan would do. So that is the difference. So as a marketer, it's very important for you to understand when to use an icon, when to use an index, and when to use a symbol. Okay, now I'll give you another example. Let's say you are the director of a museum, okay, and you have 2 options. Which of the following would you choose? Okay, you could use models of dinosaurs in your in your museum. So it would obviously have replication and similarity. So this would be an icon. That's clear, no? Or you could use a real fossil of a dinosaur, which would be a part of the whole, right? So this would be an index. Now, in this case, which one do you think would be more appropriate? Do you think an icon would be more appropriate?
Index.
An index, obviously, right? Because, I mean, obviously, because a real fossil would obviously make more sense as a model over here.
Sometimes it could also be a mix, right? Like even the
yes. So also, okay, very nice. Thank you for raising that, Prashant. See, what happens is that this classification between icon, index, and symbol is not necessarily very mutually exclusive. Okay, because one thing can have multiple meanings for someone. So if I talk about a church, if I have a drawing of a church, okay, it can represent just the church itself. B, it could be an index because it could depict the place where Jesus resides. It could be a symbol of Christianity. It could be a symbol of the whole religion also. So how the consumer or how the viewer is going to derive meaning from that sign is very, very subjective in nature. So it's not like there is a mutually exclusive category and you can very clearly say this is this and this is this. Okay, and that is why we also spoke about the denotation and connotations also, right? But right now, since we're just doing basic classifications, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. In fact, Pierce actually came up with like 15 classifications of signs. So each of these classifications, icon, index, symbols, they also have like multiple sub-classifications. So obviously none of them can be mutually exclusive, but these are the broad categories that we are talking about today. Okay, so also clothing can be a symbol. So this is more symbolic in nature, right? So it could depict that you belong to a particular group, so a particular religious group, or you show that you're belonging to a school group. In this case, sometimes it could have positive repercussions, like maybe the way a nun or a monk would be treated. In India, if you see a Punjabi, you might get connotations of like Singh is king, or you might think of the Indian army. But maybe in the US, a lot of Punjab people, Sikhs are targeted because people confuse them with Islamic terrorists also. So again, what I was trying to explain here is that how a sign is going to be interpreted like, how you say beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. Similarly, meaning also lies in the eyes of the viewer in a sign system. So, and like we said, everything is a sign. Sometimes sign, again, like talking about clothing, sometimes it could depict defiance or rebellion. I also wanted to talk about this. So you'll find a lot of women wearing male formals. Does anyone want to talk about what that depicts and what that signifies? Sucharita, Prashant, someone? Devanjan has been doing a lot of conversation with me. I'm glad.
Sense of power,
Yeah.
or I mean, since conventionally the men are supposed to be the people who work out, or historically, so by wearing that, women are kind of trying to say that, yeah, we are equal, or we are as good as them.
Exactly. So you know how, though no one really says that nowadays, but yes.
So there are just 3 comments also. So Ritika
Yes.
says it also could be professionalism, seriousness, and Shreya says it could be equality, and Inquisitive says expression of equality. Yeah, just wanted
Right.
to fill you in.
Yeah, thank you for interrupting, because I'm not really opening the chat. I
Yeah.
get so, but exactly. So when, but that is all coming from where Prashant is saying, no, that when you're saying that those male formals depict depict seriousness, and that these male formals depict your strength of work, it's basically coming from that original thought that males are stronger or better at this than females. So if you tell a male ki chudiya pehen lo, it is considered an insult. But for a female to wear male clothing, it is actually considered to be a compliment. So again, even something like clothing, something very simple as that, can also have multiple connotations and meanings. Okay, what's next? Okay, so I'm coming back to religion. So let's look at some Indian advertisements which have used religious signs and symbols. So now in this first one, this is an ad for Shalimar coconut oil. This is an ad from Bengal. Now this red sign over here, if you see this, does anyone want to tell me what they think this is? An icon, index, or symbol?
This is a symbol.
Right. Why? Because it does not have any similarity with anything in particular. Also, it doesn't have a causal linkage, or it's not really a part of the whole. And also, only a small group of people or a small community of people will be able to understand what this symbol stands for. Not everyone will be able to understand what this means, right? Here I've got the Om sign for Sugandhlata incense cones. Again, obviously, this is a symbol. Okay, oh, this one is my favorite. Okay, Shandar Dhulai ke liye number 17 washing powder from Chemical Industries. I don't know why they thought that using goddess Durga for washing powder would be appropriate. So, so a lot of my work was also about the relevance of using signs and symbols in advertising. So, you don't just pick up anything and just chapo on the advertisement. Okay, but in India, of course, everything goes. In India, it's like free flow. Jisko jo Bhagwan use karna, you can really use whatever you want. So, maybe they were trying to depict that women who wash clothes with number 17 are as strong as goddess Durga or something. That is a debate for some other day. So this is what is this image of goddess Durga? It is obviously an icon, because it is an exact replication of goddess Durga. Okay. And this one also, I really like this one. Okay, so this is actually an ad for Pan Masala, and I found this in billboard hoarding. This is found all over Calcutta. I mean, I don't know if it's found across India or not. I have seen these hoardings all across India, and I've actually clicked this picture myself from the hoardings. Okay, so this is an ad for Pan Masala, Shanti Pan Masala, and they're using Lord Krishna's, mukut and the peacock feather in association with something like Pan Masala. I mean, so far, somehow the Hindutva brand has not caught hold of this. Otherwise, these guys are really going to go for a beating. Okay. So this peacock feather, this is obviously an index. Why is this an index? Because this is a part of the whole image of Lord Krishna. If you had the whole image of Lord Krishna, that would be an icon, like in the goddess Durga case. But here, since you have only a part of his whole image, you have an icon.
Riddhi, there's a question. So are icons more universal than indices or symbol? As such, are they more useful than the other two when addressing a wider audience? The question is from Inquisitive.
Okay.
You
Can
can
you
take
just
now, or you can take little
no,
later
no, no.
also.
Let's take it
Yeah,
now. Let's take it now.
right.
We're
Are
talking about
icons more universal than indices or symbol? And as such, are
see,
they
first
more
of all, there
useful
is no
than the other two?
see, like I said, no. When I showed you the example of the burning of effigy of Ravan versus I showed you the museum example, right? So when in the case of the burning of effigy, that icon was much more useful, right? Because it is a clear replication. But in the case of a museum, that index was so you really can't say that this is better than that. I personally, if I'm going to talk about logos, which I'm just coming to on this slide, I personally would suggest for logos, I would suggest icons because it makes more clear associations. But if you look at an Apple brand, which uses something like an Apple, which has no connection whatsoever, even a symbol has worked beautifully for them. Right. So there is no such thing as universal ka to koi definition hi nahi hai because anyway signs and symbols are for a group of people, something that I understand. Maybe someone in Africa, I'm sorry for using such a Vaisa example, would not understand, or someone in another country might not understand, which a lot of Hindus or a lot of Indians would understand. So universality ka to question is only, it's just out of the question only, universality. Okay, but of course, let's say if you're talking about computer icons, okay, then obviously using an icon makes much more sense than using symbols. So if you look at journals which work on from the IT industry, there they always say that, you know, if you have a home icon or you have a print icon, you know, the icon itself, people can understand what that means, versus if you just have a random symbol which doesn't really mean anything. Okay, what was the next part of the question, Kranti? Can you just repeat that? You need to unmute yourself.
No, so the question is that only you have addressed it. So the question, the second part was whether they are more useful than the other two and addressing a wider audience.
Yeah. Okay. No, see, wider audience definitely because of the physical similarity between the signifier and the signified. Even a kid would understand what that means, and obviously, a symbol would take more time for people to kind of understand, right? So that is the only thing. But of course, it totally depends on you as a marketer and depends on the situation also. So we are going to look at some logos. So now I've got this logo of Instagram. Okay, if you see that picture over there, they have tried to make a camera. I hope you can understand that there's a camera with that small dot over there, which is the click button and the flash. Okay, so this is obviously an icon, and also there is very clear linkage between what they're trying to depict, because Instagram obviously is a place where you click pictures and you upload them. So the logo depicts very clearly what the company is about or what the site is about. Okay, and because they've used a camera, it's an icon. If you look at these two logos for CrossFit or Honda, so if you look at this CrossFit logo, can you see that clearly? I hope it's big enough. You can see the dumbbells, you can see two arms, and you can see the bulging muscles. And you can also see the two wings. So all of these are indices. So they've combined a couple of indices. You can see part of the dumbbells, you can see a part of the human body. Sorry, you can see part of the wings. Even in Honda, you can see the wings. Maybe they're trying to depict that, you know, with the Honda bike, you can fly with wings, etc. So these are indices, sorry. And if you look at these three, these are symbols, something like a red cross or a tick, and even Lego, because like I said, all words are symbols. So the word Lego really doesn't mean anything. But obviously now we know that the moment you see that Lego, the Lego written over there, you know that they are building blocks that are used for creativity, etc. So in fact, to go back to your question also, for a logo, I personally would suggest going with an icon, or at least an index, because at least, you know, you can understand what the company is about, especially for a new company. But then of course, again, it'll depend on various things. Okay, so why are these important? I'm going to just, we have time. Okay, so why is this important? See, because marketing, you know, initially when marketing was studied the way we have studied in PGP days, like we just studied Kotler and the 4 P's of marketing. Marketing is not just that. It is not just advertising. So it's basically, marketing is actually part of society and culture. And if you do not understand what stands for what and how we communicate, how meaning is made, and especially because we are saying that signs are socially constructed, that you and I are creating meaning. So, and because this process is such a subjective process, so understanding signs and symbols I should not say symbols, I should just say signs. Understanding signs and how their meaning is made is very, very important from a marketing perspective. Okay, so now we will go to the last part of it. Does anyone have any questions here or anything? Anyone wants to give any examples, any thoughts, something that came up to their mind, something that they saw? Or maybe even later, if you feel something that strikes you, or you get a light bulb moment, please feel free to interrupt me or mail me later also. I mean, I love talking about this. Okay, so now we're going to go to the last part of it, which is the concept of myths and archetypes. So this is not really from the semiotics field. This I have picked up from the sociological field, but a lot of this is these have a lot of overlaps. So I kind of incorporated it in this only. You might have heard of this gentleman, obviously, Claude Lévi-Strauss. He's the father of modern anthropology. He was deeply inspired by Saussure. And like Saussure compares language and science, Lévi-Strauss compares language and culture. Okay, he came up with the whole concept of structuralism, and which is basically about looking at the underlying patterns of thought in all forms of human activity. Okay, don't worry, I'm not getting into structuralism. I will look at just some aspects that Lévi-Strauss kind of talked about, which we can really use in semiotics and marketing. Okay, so the first one is a myth. So firstly, I want to say that here the term myth is not used in the way that we use it in common parlance. Okay, so a myth is not like, when we say this is a myth, that, this is something that is not true. That is not the way in which the word myth is being used here. Here, the word myth basically means a story, okay, a culturally specific narrative of the human experience and ways of thinking. Okay, it is a kind of a story or a narrative. Okay, and these narratives help us to understand the underlying structure of culture, which is what structuralism is all about. And just like Saussure says that language also has a structure under it, similarly, Lévi-Strauss says that culture also has a structure under it. And this structure you can understand through these myths. Okay, so I'm going to make it simpler for you right now. Okay, so look at these common myths that, just give me a minute to drink some water and my throat is going. Okay, so these are some common mythologies that we've all heard of, no? Roman mythology, Greek mythology. In the Indian context, obviously, you have the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Now, you know what we said. Basically, what is Lévi-Strauss saying? That all myths, they have an underlying structure. All cultures have an underlying structure, and these myths help us to find out these structures. So what are the common themes that can be found in all of these? There are certain themes which are found in Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and a lot of our folk tales also. So most of these themes they talk about creation, divinity, religion, life, death, our existence, natural phenomena. They will talk about the adventures of cultural heroes. Do you realize that this is there in all of these, no? Even though the stories might be different, if you look at the smaller stories, the basic themes are all of these only. Right. Also, we have to remember that these myths are different from legends. So we are not talking about real historical characters. We are not talking about the stories of Shivaji or Akbar Birbal or maybe a Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. We are talking more on the supernatural realm. So we might be talking about a Zeus, or you might be talking about the fable of how Jesus Christ was born in a stable, or Krishna, he was taken in a tokri on his head and he crossed the river with his father. So these are a little more supernatural in nature. Okay, they're not like real historical stories that we're talking about. Also, these myths are different from fables. So they're different from like your Aesop fables, where there's a lot of moral stories. They're not concerned with moral truths. Okay, in fact, if you realize, most of these mythologies, they have a lot of positives and negatives. So if you look at the Greek and Roman mythologies, the gods, they behave the way they want to. Whoever wants to kill anyone, whoever wants to do anything, they do. Even in our Ramayana and Mahabharata also. Or if you see, the story of the Samudra Manthan, how the gods and demons, they work together to get the elixir, but in the end, the gods, they cheated the demons to keep the elixir for themselves, right? So no one is talking about what is right and what is wrong over here. In fact, they talk about everything and they're very open about it. Usually these myths will be a product of a group of people, a racial group of people, rather than an individual. So even though it might have been written down by one person, usually these myths will come down generation to generation. They will be coming down through various people in the society. Okay, so why are these myths still relevant today? So you have, let's say in Christianity, you have the concept of the lost paradise. Why do you have that? Even today, people actually believe that if you live a virtuous life today, you will have a better life later. Or this whole myth of the golden age, ki ek achhe din aayenge, which is even now the biggest campaign in India was through this. Or even if you look at Obama's campaign, the first campaign that he had was on hope, that there is that hope that a golden age is going to come. Okay. Also, there is the concept of this mythological hero who is there in all human cultures. So do you realize that, what Levi-Strauss was saying, that all these human cultures have some common structures. There are certain things which are common across cultures. Okay, so this mythological hero is found across cultures. It is found whether you are even in India, we have so many smaller states, and we have so many stories in each of these states. All of them will have a mythological hero somewhere. So whether you're talking about Ram or the Pandavas or the Greek heroes, in modern days, you have Batman, Superman, or Spider-Man. Now, see again the common linkages, or the hero will fight a villain. He is usually very reluctant to become a hero, but it is his destiny to become a hero. Even if you look at Harry Potter, okay, he comes up from a very, very, like a difficult background, and then he suddenly rises up and then he defeats the villain in that sense. Even so, in modern examples, if you look at people like Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, what we have done as a society is that we need these mythological heroes. So we have taken these people and we have put them up on a pedestal, and we have made them into heroes of some sort, right? Okay, so now we come to the archetype. So the myth or the mythology that we said was
Just
basically
one question. Why do you say that myths talk about both negative and positive? Because most myths have the overarching theme of victory of good over evil, or victory of truth over lies, or something like that, right?
Mhm.
So why would you say that that's only fables, but that's not in myths?
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying that there is no. There are a lot of negatives and positives. Like everything goes. I'm not saying that. At the end of the day, they might say that the good wins over evil, but I'm saying that they're not concerned with. That like in your Aesop fables, or if you talk of some of those stories, it's very clear that this is right and this is wrong. In fact, if you look at the Mahabharata, there are a lot of things which are very, very wrong in the Mahabharata, right? But I'm just saying that they're still there and they're still spoken about openly. People, they in most cultures, you are very openly talking about life and death and how life is dealt, and you do good things and you do bad things in life. Okay. So coming to an archetype. Now, archetype is basically either an image or a plot or a character type, which is usually found in these myths or literature or religion or folklore, etc. Okay, so myth is basically the larger story or the narrative, and the archetype are the smaller images or character types in those myths. To give you some examples, you'll find a hero, you'll find a villain, you'll maybe have a damsel in distress, a temptress, a girl next door, you'll have one mother, a good mother, maybe star-crossed lovers. These are again common themes which are found either in literature or in myths or in movies, or like I said, literature. So they can be found even in your Saas Bahu series. Like I've put that picture over there. So in mass media also. So archetypical characters are found everywhere, right? Now, as an advertiser, you have two options. You either stick to an archetype or you break the archetype, right? So, okay, sorry. I just moved a step ahead. Okay. You could also have situation archetypes. So like, victory of good over evil, or death and rebirth, the hero's journey, rags to riches. So if you look at someone like Narendra Modi, this rags to riches thing has really been co-opted by the BJP, by showing that how he came up from being a chai wala to becoming, where he is today. Or like all of these, you have riches to rags, you can have nature, you can have quest. So these are basic common themes which are found in a lot of our common media. Okay. So I'm going to look at some examples. I'll take another 10 minutes of your time. Okay, I'm almost done. We look at some examples of how archetypical characters are used in advertising. Basic concept of good mother. Okay, this is found in a lot of advertising. Okay, the good mother, she's the superwoman. She's spending time with her family. She's helping her child to succeed. She's cooking healthy food. She's washing her house, keeping the house clean, washing clothes, etc. Right. So if you look at this ad, this is an ad for Tide, but just look at this. Okay, you have a son with the medal. How does having white clothes lead to a medal? I don't know, but and the mom is looking very nice and proud, and the son has done well in life. Again, an ad for Lysol, which is a stain remover or a floor cleaner, right? And the mother is playing with the child. The child is on a horse, and there are lots of toys around the child. 3 generations of women cooking in the kitchen. Okay, again, good mothers. And so this is an ad for, I think it's an ad for a kitchen chimney or a fridge or something. I think the chimney is in the background. Okay, so here, you could, if you want to do a more deeper analysis, you could also look at the grandmother who's wearing a sleeveless blouse and that short hair. So what are they trying to depict from that? So everything kind of has meaning into meaning into meaning. Okay, so everything has been put in that ad for a particular reason, right? If you look at this Bonvita ad, I really like this ad because I think, look at the look of determination on that mom's face, that eyebrows raised, and it's like, so focused. It looks like they've woken up early in the morning and she's taking her son to some karate practice or boxing practice. I don't know, something like that. But it really looks like, so look at the moms, they're selling Tide and Lysol and some kitchen chimney and Bonvita. I think Bonvita is the only product which is actually targeted at a mom. The rest of the products, so for all of these, you're like a good mom. So I want to give an example of an ad which broke the archetype. Okay, look at this one. Just take a minute to think about what they are saying. So they're saying, everyone else is saying, you keep your son's clothes clean, he's going to win a medal. Okay, you keep your house clean and your child will grow up and do well or whatever. And what are they saying? They have completely broken the archetype, and they're saying, nahi, daag achhe hain, let the children be. As a mom, even if your child is dirtying his clothes, it's fine, right? And in fact, there's a recent campaign, not very recent, by Surf, which is Haar Ko Harao. So again, they're breaking the archetype, and they're saying that losing or failing is not a bad thing. It's good to fail because you learn from it. So see, why semiotics is important is because it helps you to kind of figure out that what is everyone else doing. Everyone else is doing the same thing, and how do you break from that clutter and do something different? How do you do something new which everyone else is not doing? Okay, let's take another archetype. The archetype of women who are supposed to stay within the rules, So you have the whole story of Lakshman Rekha, which obviously comes from your Ramayana also, or even in India, even today, or globally also, blaming rape victims. Women are supposed to stay in their moral limits, banning of cell phones and jeans, etc. So an ad which broke this stereotype or this archetype, this one, why should boys have all the fun? They're very, very clearly saying, no, women can have fun. We are not going to just kind of be in the house and etc. And again, if you notice over here, of course, they've used Priyanka Chopra and Alia. That is a completely different thing. If you look at the clothing, look at Alia, she's again in that sleeveless. And if you look at Priyanka, she's also in that tank top with that spaghetti. I mean, these are very, very tiny things, but they kind of show that, that you're trying to show a modern woman, something like that. Okay. This one is my favorite. Okay, give me 5 more minutes of your time. Okay, the macho archetype. I love this because this is something which is there globally, globally. Matlab that, that real man with that rippling muscles and that dar ke aage jeet hai, and he's like hanging from that cliff and drinking itne aaram se, and the women are all falling for them. No, she's washing his underwear and getting so excited about it. And look at what is this Akshay Kumar with fit hai boss and Aram say, and that kind of thing, the kind of bullshit, yeah, but this kind of macho thing, but it really sells, no? I mean, this Marlboro guy with the cowboy hat and a lot of even now, I mean, if you look at Axe or a lot of these ads, they're still using this stereotype, no? So this one ad, which I love the way that they have broken this stereotype. Just look at this. They have used the word mard, but they're saying man against rape and discrimination. That the real man, the real mard, the real macho is someone who fights against rape and discrimination. They've really turned the whole concept of this whole macho thing around on its head. Or in fact, even recently, this ad by Akshay Kumar. And they're saying हीरोगिरी ये फूकने में नहीं है, but ये napkin देने में है. So the concept of that typical hero, the concept of that ki haan, you know, that he has that muscles and he's fighting, and it's not necessary. So as a marketer, how you break that clutter and how you change, and you do not necessarily have to stick to that archetype. That is a very, very important lesson to learn over here. Okay, so this is enough for today. I think we've covered a lot of stuff in a very short time. So quickly, today we spoke about what is a sign, the basic unit of meaning. We spoke about the signifier and the signified. We spoke about 3 kinds of signs: icon, index, and symbol. And we looked at myths and archetypes. Okay. So any thoughts, any points to add, any questions? Anyone wants to say something?
Riddhi, there are few questions already in the chat box. Maybe I can take them. So it's from Inquisitive. Now, after listening to the talk, I feel now inquisitive a word, which is a symbol. So I think this person is trying to, the inquisitive symbolizes his inquisitiveness, if I'm correct.
Should I stop my screen sharing so at least we can all see?
Yes. Okay. So the question is, in the case of Apple, wasn't the meaning given to the symbol post-success, while in marketing, we are actively looking to create success via signs?
Obviously, yes, very true. No, so at that time they were like, oh, kuch bhi bana lo. Let's just kind of put anything, and I think it just worked. They just did that on a lark, and it worked. But maybe they were lucky, or maybe they really took the product itself was just so wonderful that they were able to kind of just go to that level. But I mean, today if you launch a brand or a company and you just put a mango or you put a bottle on it, I mean, I'm unless your product is like brilliant, and that you're really, really doing something brilliant, I mean, I wouldn't suggest that. I mean, of course, that was something that happened just post success, and neither everyone says, they're so brilliant, and they just put an apple and it still worked. But I don't think that is something that would work for everyone. I mean, it wouldn't. I mean, that's what my thing is. But if you feel comfortable doing that, go ahead and do it. Why not?
And another question also from Inquisitive. What's your take on Imperial Blues Men Will Be Men campaign?
So what is the question, Mr.? Is it Mr. or Miss Inquisitive? I don't understand what the question is. What do you want me to say? What is my take in what context?
Perhaps you can come on. Okay, archetypes.
Yeah, of course. So they are completely sticking to the archetype that men will be men. And of course, it's working. I'm not saying that you need to break the archetype every time. They have completely, and they have used it in a fun way. Some people might feel offended. I mean, I don't know about that. But I think that they have really used it in a fun way, that, and especially the one with that hospital thing, and that nurse comes and that the patient's BP starts kind of fluctuating. I mean, I don't know if some of you know that. See, I've seen that. I mean, it is funny. It is funny, and they are sticking to that archetype. Okay, boys will be boys. So, I mean, no one is saying that you necessarily have to break the archetype all the time. Of course, if you can use it in a good way, why not? As a consumer, do you consider a brand logo while consuming or not consuming a product or service? See, now this question that you have raised, there's a lot of research on this. So it's not that, when you're going to buy a brand, I will just look at the logo and buy the brand. Obviously not. The way a brand is built is, of course, it takes time. And you see the logo in various times. You will see it maybe in the packaging. You will see it also when in an advertisement. You might see it maybe in the supermarket. So not that I will say that, okay, because I like the logo, I'm going to buy the brand. It doesn't work. It's not as simple as that. But of course, the brand logo plays a role in what you are doing, right? Shailendra will take up your question in a while. I'm sorry, what is this?
Has raised his hand. I just responded to him. He has a question.
I couldn't. Yeah, please. Who is Shailendra? Please say.
Shailendra, you can come. Yeah.
Hi, Riddhi, thank you.
Hi.
Regarding icon, we talked about icon having a physical resemblance to the signified. In that case, conceptual objects like risk, which does not have any materiality, do we mean that we cannot have an icon for conceptual objects? Because not reality implies physical similarity we cannot conceive, right?
See, like something like anger, we are able to kind of make an icon out of it, like an emoticon out of it, even though it's something you can't see. So, I mean, I don't know if you are a good enough visual artist and you are able to depict risk in some way. I wouldn't say that for all things that you can't see, you can't have an icon, right? For emotions, you have all your emoticons. But I mean, if I had to kind of come up with an icon for risk, I mean, it would be difficult, I guess.
Thank
I mean,
you.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not the visual designer. I'm not someone who I just look at various signs and symbols and say what they mean. So, but I don't think that there's any blanket rule as such that there is that if there's something that you can't see, you cannot depict it. Like even concepts like fear or jealousy, there are a lot of ways in which we can depict those, and there could be iconic depictions also, not necessarily symbolic. That's what I kind of feel.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I do have one.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I have a question. It is not directly related to the content of today's seminar, although I must say I really enjoyed it and it really helped me clarify the basics of semiotics. So that was, so it was a really engaging seminar. So my question is, as somebody who wants to learn about this further and wants to study semiotics further, what next steps would you suggest? Like, how do I go about it, or what are some resources I could use as a beginner to further familiarize myself with this field?
So I have been in touch with a female called Laura Oswald. She is a semiotician in US. She's a very, very senior semiotician. In fact, she has very recently published a book, and I'm very proud to say that she has put my name in her acknowledgement. So I'm very, very kicked about it. She's a senior semiotician in the US. And so she has published 3 books actually. One is called Creating Value. You could write that down. There's another one that's called Marketing Semiotics. One is Marketing Semiotics, one is Creating Value, and the third was a recent one, which I said that, you know, she's written about me. It is basically a textbook on marketing semiotics. It's published by OUP, Oxford University Press. If you want, I'll just send you the link later. Okay, you can just
that would be really, really helpful. I would really appreciate
Laura Oswald, Laura Oswald.
Yeah, I got that. I've heard about some of her books before. Creating Value is something I've heard of before. I was meaning to read it.
And so, but if you are in the FP program, you can easily read the first 2 books.
I'm not. I got recommended by a colleague. I actually work in Delhi.
So then I will not suggest the first 2 books because they are hardcore for academicians and researchers. So there's a lot of content which is, and a lot of it will go over the head also. So then I will suggest.
Okay, so I'll just clarify. I work in market research, so I do work in this field.
But a lot of it is very, like very, very academic in nature, like really academic. So, and it's not really relevant also. I mean, you don't really need to know all the theories. But I would suggest the last one, which I said is Marketing Semiotics for Practitioners, something like that. I'll just send you the link, or I'll send you a picture of the book. So that is like a textbook format. And there, you know, she has a lot of like, you know, models, and she has a lot of stuff like there's something called a semiotic square, which you can easily use. It's a very simple tool to kind of like, you know, we spoke about the archetypes and how you kind of plot where everyone else is and where you want to be. So the semiotic square is a very simple tool that you could use. So I think that book would be it's a very recent published book, but this you could look at.
I Marketing Semiotics for Practitioners, right?
Something like that. I don't remember the exact.
Laura, I'll find it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Any more questions?
People who are just interested and don't work in the field. I mean, there's a lot of YouTube videos available online. I've started a channel on YouTube, but it's not yet very ready. I just have 2 or 3 videos. So, but I mean, you could just read up online. I just did a lot of reading, and there's a lot of stuff available online. And it's really, really interesting. And if anyone's interested, I'm also kind of doing more of these workshops. I will be conducting a 1-day workshop, like a full day workshop also, which will be more practitioner oriented. So, I mean, we could always just ping me and I could get in touch with you if any of you are interested in something like that.
I have another question.
Panda is not yet ready. So I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And-
nothing.
And I don't feel very comfortable. I don't like to do self-promotion at all. So, I mean, I could send, just look for Riddhi, but I don't think it's public yet also. I've made the videos, but I'm still not ready kind of to go out there and put myself out there. I'm a bit shy that way.
Right.
Yes, Sucharita.
Yeah, so I have another question, but I'm having a little difficulty articulating it, so I'm just going to try my best. But we talked about how colors also can be used as signifiers. That's one. And we also talked about how it is often arbitrary. How people interpret meaning can vary from one group to another. So when we use colors as signifiers, what would be a way to go about that? Because I was thinking about it, and a color like red could symbolize so many things. It could symbolize anger, passion, love. There is so much, and that follows for all different colors. So how should a brand probably, or what are the things that a brand should probably keep in mind while using a color then?
Yeah, it's, first of all, there can never be a blanket answer that, this is how
Yeah.
you go, right? It depends on what your brand positioning is. Okay, so for example, if you look at something like a Swatch, they are they are targeting the pop identity of a young consumer. So they are like colorful watches. So even the product has those colors. So it's, we're not just talking about the logo, or just the whole brand is about that, right? Or if you look at something like McDonald's, they use yellow, that yellow and that red, that combination. It's, I think, because of that whole family atmosphere, etc. But and then on the other hand, something like a Rolex uses a lot of gold in there, because they're showing that luxury and that royalty thing. Red, in fact, I feel is a very, very overhyped color, and everyone just uses red. I mean, red and blue, I mean, they're just so overdone. But if you're looking at, let's say, something like Dove, they've used white, no? In fact, recently I came across something on LinkedIn. In fact, yesterday, someone has come up with a soap bar which is coffee shaped, and they've got various flavors of coffee. So you have a cappuccino flavored, a latte flavored, different flavors of coffee flavored soap, and each bar is bean shaped. It's kind of cute, but I mean, then they're using browns. So I mean, it's not really, I mean, of course, it will depend on your product, it will depend on your marketing positioning, what you want to convey, the message that you want to convey as a communicator, no? Based on that. So, I mean, if you're going to think only from a designer perspective, or only from a person who's going to design the logo, or it doesn't work like that, no? So a brand is a whole a gamut of so many other things. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, it does help. So then a color or any element of a logo then doesn't really work in isolation. It needs to complement the rest. Yeah.
I like the fact that most of my answers will be, it depends. Actually, most of my answers will, because it does depend on so many things, no? Especially here, you cannot have something as simple as saying that, okay, this is a rule, that, okay, you should use icons, or you should use that. I mean, it doesn't really work like that. So in fact, even in my thesis, so I was working on, I said that, okay, let's say in an advertisement, you use two types of signs. Let's say you use an icon, which is, let's say, a Ganesh, and you use a symbol, let's say an Om, okay, and which works better in an advertisement. So we used a soap advertisement, we used 2 ads, and we did an experiment, etc. So even though in my conclusion, I did say that, okay, an icon works better, but you have to kind of say, no, this is only in this specific situation. It is only working for this specific product category in this situation. And it's very, very difficult to generalize all over. Otherwise, then it becomes really, I mean, you can't just make a generic statement like that.
Right. So, okay, so I have like one final question, which is not much to do with the content again. But you mentioned a while back that you might be conducting a slightly longer workshop for practitioners. So I wanted to understand how can I stay updated on that.
Actually, the thing is that I haven't really found enough people to kind of do this. So if anyone can take the initiative and ask me to come, and I get even like 5 or 10 people, I'd love to do something like that. So this workshop, I've been trying to get this workshop up and running for more than 2 months now, or 3 months. And I've spoken to a lot of students at various IIMs, and it wasn't working out. And then Kranti kind of, thank you, Kranti, I have to say that you just pinged me at the right time, and then this kind of worked out. I mean, if I have even 5 people And Sucharita, maybe you can take the lead, and if you can also get me 5 people, I could easily do a day long.
Right, I was thinking I'll just check in at work once that, if more people would be interested, then I would get back.
Then I can of course get more people from my end also. But this is like, since you're working in market research, obviously this really has a lot of context for you. But
Yeah,
I don't know what is the background of the other people in this group, so in that case. But I would love to do something like that. In fact, I'm doing a full-fledged course, a 3-credit course at IIM Nagpur next term, which is for the PGP batch. So
Oh, okay.
like a full, but that would also contain a lot of theory, not as much practitioner oriented as something that would be targeted to something like you, to someone like you.
Right.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah.
Thanks, Sucharita. And any more questions or comments or something that you would like to add?
So here's a question which was stemmed from a talk which Balki, the creative head of advertising in, I don't remember which advertising firm, had given when I was studying at B school. When someone asked him that how much of your, so Balki just came and presented a bunch of ads which he had designed, created. And I think one question was that how much of this is science and how much of this is creativity, or art, to take the classic question of art versus science. And Balki's take was that, eventually it's all art. You can go back and put science into it, and like a postmortem, go back and say that, oh, this signifies this, or I was trying to say this. So since this is fairly, it can be theory and academics, how much of this is, where does it stop and where does the creativity start? Or how does that work?
Okay, so I couldn't get you very clearly, but if I may reframe your question, are you asking me that how much is, you said how much of it is art and how much of it is science? Is that what you're?
Yes, yes, yes.
See, a creative person might say that, okay, this is art, but I am an academician and I would like to say that it is a science, obviously. A lot of the work that we do is analyzing the work that is already out there. So maybe I am looking at it from a content analytic point of view, where I am analyzing the content which is actually out there. From a marketing company's perspective, so let's say if I was working in a marketing company, I might not even be the creative director of the company, but once the creative team has come up with something, at least I would suggest that the marketing team makes sure that all their signs are in place. Okay, you don't want, so for example, the recent the fiasco that happened with the Tanishq ad, which was really sad actually. So even though the intentions were perfectly in place, how something so small as an intermarriage thing, I mean, I'm just saying that it's great, of course you should be creative and you do things, but you also need to be very, very clear and very aware of the fact that people interpret very, very small things in different ways. So keep the creativity in place. No one is saying that no, you don't be creative and you start thinking completely like in the box, but also maybe just be a bit more aware of the fact that, okay, this could be interpreted in a different way and this could be interpreted in a different way. So also, if you are creating an ad for India versus if you take the same ad to the Middle East, or you take it to US or England, it would have different so as a marketing company, for the same brand also, when you go to another country or a different culture, at least make sure that you have the cultural perspectives in place. I hope I've answered your question. Okay, so I'm not questioning that don't be creative. Of course, be creative.
If there are any more questions, we can quickly take them, maybe for a couple of minutes. Yeah. So there's another question by Inquisitive.
Directly affect the sales for entrepreneurs putting resources to this kind of effort. I'm sorry, but I didn't understand the question. Inquisitive, could you just, what is the question? How much of what are you saying that directly affects the sales? You could just unmute and tell me what you're saying.
I think what they're trying to say is the classic question of, all the research that you put into it. How do you finally quantify it and say that, okay, I put the red color instead of the blue,
That
and
all marketing companies would love to know. I mean, if someone could come up with a formula to kind of figure out that what is the value of my brand image, or what is the value of one advertisement and how much sales it is. I mean, then we would all be minting money, wouldn't it? I mean, that is like a classic question that everyone wants the answer to. But I'm not saying that you put in a lot of money into building a brand image. Please understand that a brand image is not built only through money. It is also built through your customer interactions. It is built through the services you are providing. It is not built only through. So even a gesture like, suppose the customer is angry at something and you have given a refund, that is also a sign. Even though in this particular workshop I have only spoken about images because I can show that clearly. Even the way your salespeople interact with your customers, even the way whether you decide to give a refund, all of that is also a sign, right? So your brand image is your biggest asset, and that is what your brand equity means. So I mean, I wouldn't, let me just read what you're saying. Like they say, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half exactly. So a brand image, I mean, maybe you were talking about I'm talking to inquisitive here. If you were talking about, maybe you meant the image part of it. Maybe are you talking, but my definition of brand image is not the physical drawing or the logo of the image. Please understand, a brand image means, yeah, so I got that. So that is not the meaning of brand image. In academic terms, brand image basically means what are the values and connotations of your brand that is there in the consumer's mind. So the moment the word Apple comes, you think, oh, it's good and it's this, it's that, it's that. So there are certain thoughts that come to your mind when you think of a particular brand. That is brand image. So the creative part of it, I'm not saying that you need to be extra creative, not at all. You make a simple logo and you just go ahead with it. I'm not saying that you have to build lots of advertisement campaigns, etc. I'm not saying that at all. And obviously it will depend on if you're an entrepreneur and you have only a limited budget. No one is, in fact nowadays, you don't need a big budget. You have social media. You don't need a big budget at all. When I created my first company, it was called Excelf. It was an online book lending website. I sold that company maybe 10 years back. Even today I get mails that, okay, what is this? And I'm saying, arey, wo company band ho gaya, brand bhi band ho gaya. But even then, people kind of, no problem at all. It's fine. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
See, being creative should not take money. It's just about that, I'm just saying that whatever you're putting out there has a meaning, and people look at these meanings in different ways. So be very careful about what you put out there. That's the only thing that I'm trying to say.
So thank you so much, Riddhi. I think we're at 6:20 and I'm guessing there are no more questions. I particularly really enjoyed this whole talk, the whole workshop, because this topic is very new to me. And I was even, in fact, taking down the notes, like you said, throughout. And I think this is an emerging field, and especially for those into management, to be being aware of this particular topic itself is very important. And something that struck me when you're showing the clothes, as symbols, or so that just reminded me of the PK movie, where in the climax scene, a lot of people come and then you're guessing one person to be of one religion, but they're actually not. So that's one thing. And also, like you said, the Tanishq ad, or even for instance, Biba, how it's trying to come up with certain ads on sexuality, breaking certain archetypes. And yeah, so I think this, to be aware of this, how advertisement or how brands position themselves and how they advertise and create these logos, I think is very much helpful. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hi, Riddhi. I just wanted to add one last thing, since I feel like we're nearing a close now. So thank you so much for this session. First of all, I think I did get to learn a lot. Since it is something that I get to work with regularly, it really helps to have my concepts right, so that I can also do a better job. So, I don't think I mentioned, I actually work in Purple Audacity. I work at Purple Audacity. I got recommended by Mr. Mukul Gautam. He's actually my reporting manager. So he suggested it because he knows that I'm really interested